Uh, RPG A Day 2017, day 20. Let's see. What is the best source for out-of-print RPGs? Well, I have Amazon. That's it. That's the only source I've used for out-of-print RPGs, and since I don't really collect RPGs, there is only a couple of source books that I've ever bought that have not been in print at the time. I know other sources and other avenues like DriveThru RPG exists, but I've never used their services, so in an effort not to make this video last to less than 10 seconds or so, I think I'm gonna do something different here. This question and a bunch of questions from here on in at the end stretch of this challenge for this year, is filled with a lot of questions that I have similarly not very satisfactory answers to. And in an effort to, keep the positivity up about the hobby, it would be kind of a lame thing to just go and answer something that short and just kind of dismissively kind of the question on, or just trying to find some kind of segue to go on a tangent about something that really doesn't have anything to do with the question. So what I decided to do was go back to last year's RPG A Day challenge and browse through its questions and see if there's any questions that I would have wanted to answer but didn't take part last year. And there was a bunch. And today I'm going to answer the second question of last year, which is best game session since August 2015. And I was kind of aching to mention this, and it's actually a session that's been recorded and broadcast, and it's on my YouTube channel if you want to check it out. It's a game session from my Werewolf the Dark Ages Sveriges Elite campaign, the medieval werewolf game that was set in medieval Sweden, and I had my regular online gaming group of Roger of Rojab 1, John from Master of Flowers, and Phil from Philippe 1 Kajira. And we had a blast. I really, really liked that campaign. It's one of my favorite campaigns that I've ever ran, and I'm super glad I wound up recording and broadcasting it when we played it, because it would have been a bummer, that it's kind of lost in the ether, kind of lost in our memories. And having such a crappy memory as I have, I'm glad it's been recorded, because there's been a lot of games in the past where I wish they would have been recorded, but haven't been. And in this campaign and in this particular session, it's a session that stood out to me because it's a session where I delved into something I originally dismissed. In my Werewolf the Apocalypse video, where I talk about what I would like to change about the setting of Werewolf the Apocalypse, which of course applies to the Dark Ages setting as well, was that I would have wanted to remove the realms, where when you go to the near Umbra in Werewolf, you're able to leap into different realms. And when you read about the realms from the book, on face value, they kind of seem not the sort of stuff I like. They seem kind of like Planescape, the same example I used in that earlier video, because they do look like it's like if you lived in this universe we all inhabit, and you would kind of think that let's go visit the D&D universe, like let's go visit the Star Wars universe. It's kind of like that, and it's not that fun. So what I decided to do with that was that I wanted to go to the kind of approach that I love most about Werewolf, which is the shamanistic aspect about it. And what I wanted to do was to make every realm a kind of a raw elemental force of the universe, where every realm is kind of volatile, kind of intense, kind of something where, unless you're like an elder shaman or some sort of a really experienced like Jedi like sage, you wouldn't be able to last there very long. Your kind of consciousness couldn't take that much kind of spiritual sensory input, so when there's realms like the realm of war. You know, it's like if you look at how horrible war is in this world, imagine a realm that's basically an elemental force of war and how horrifying that would be. Like every negative aspect about war would be made manifest there, and you could interact with it and yeah, test your metal, I guess, you know. And in this session, the player characters went into the realm of Fangaia or Pangea, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Basically, the name derives from the time when the Earth was still only one giant continent, you know. And in this session, I was really it was very satisfactory to have this kind of structure where the session clearly had a beginning, middle, and an end. It really had like a 3-act structure where they were kind of introduced to the setting, introduced to the world first, then kind of kicked in the ass to kind of test themselves and all that, and then the climax would become kind of self-discovery, kind of satisfactory kind of deal where the characters at the beginning of the beginning of the session entered into the realm of Fangaia, and I just reveled in describing the place because Fangaia is basically like a elemental force, a kind of realm of raw wilderness. It's kind of the place where like everything having to do with wildlife and wilderness and nature is kind of run rampant. It's kind of like it's kind of like untouched, you know, pure creation in terms of wilderness, and every animal that's been, you know, that has basically extinct has been extinct from the world, or all these kind of woolly mammoths and all these kind of cave bears and those kind of prehistoric caribous with those ginormous horns and all these kinds of animals, and they ran into dire wolves and stuff like that. All these kinds of creatures exist in this world, and I just reveled in describing what the sky looks like, what the woods looks like, what the valleys look like, what grass underneath your feet feel like, what the air feels like, because it's an alien world. It's not just this world as if you were in thick woods or something. It's a completely alien world where the sounds you hear are different, the smells you smell are different, the air you breathe in feels different, gravity feels different, everything is different because it's a completely different world that doesn't follow perhaps all the natural laws that our universe follows. And in that session, the players had a lot of fun. They really described a lot of stuff they did in the first act of the session. They kind of roamed around, and they kind of had fun. They ran around and played like pups, and they came across those dire wolves and all sorts of other animals and such. And later on, in the kind of halfway point, because they were there to meet with their totem spirit, and their totem spirit was the spirit of the bear. In the kind of halfway point, they ran across this shaman werebear, this Gural, this man bear who was very reluctant to let werewolves to go and meet with his holiest of holies kind of thing, because werebears and werewolves have a very nasty history in terms of the war of rage. You know, werewolves kind of werebears had discovered the healing ability to revive the deceased, and werewolves demanded that they teach them that skill. And werebears, being kind of the nurturers of Gaia, they kind of knew that if they give these, you know, asshat warrior shitlords, you know, the ability to raise anyone from death, they're gonna misuse that and cause more destruction than healing, you know. And for that, the werewolves pretty much genocided the entirety of werebear population. That's pretty much the story of werewolves in that time. Do what we want, or we'll genocide you. You know, that's sadly what happened to most changing animals and changing breeds. Anyway, the shaman kind of tested their might. You know, it was kind of a Mortal Kombat thing where every one of them had a different kind of test that they had to prove themselves to him based on their auspice. You know, one was a warrior, one was a leader, one was a shaman, and this sort of stuff. So he tested everyone's mettle in those kind of fields, and it was a lot of fun. I completely stole something from actually a wrestling match. There's a wrestling match I really like, and it's in the Indies, and I think they kind of harped on that in the WWE later on, where Claudio Castagnoli, who later became Cesaro in WWE, was wrestling the American Dragon, Bryan Danielson, who later became Daniel Bryan in the WWE, and they worked a match where Claudio got the American Dragon in a headlock, and he kept him in that headlock the entirety of the match. And American Dragon was someone who was very proficient in mat wrestling and technical wrestling, was using every possible move to get out of it, every possible move, and the headlock stayed on like a vice grip, and it became really exciting. And once he finally got that headlock off, you know, the crowd exploded, and it was great. And immediately when that came off, you know, he yanked his opponent into a pin, and, you know, 1, 2, 3. Now I'm talking about wrestling, whatever. Basically, what I'm saying is the werebear put Phil's character, who was the Ahron, the warrior in the group, in a headlock and didn't let go, and it was exactly that. Everything he tried, he kept that kind of vice grip on him, and it was a whole lot of fun. And then finally, the climax was that they climbed a mountain, and they leaped off of the edge of the mountain and let air currents kind of carry them through the sky. And being someone to whom the Snowman cartoon that airs every Christmas is extremely nostalgic, and having listened to the kind of Nightwish version of that song as well, you know, it was like I was just describing how they're basically walking in the air when they're like gliding through the mountain range and kind of these Alps, you know, in these air currents. And at the same time, not only listening to Nightwish to get into the kind of werewolf kind of headspace, I also was listening a lot of Wintersun's Time One album. This kind of weird looking album because it's like a collector edition kind of thing, but this, I really love it, and it's become my go-to inspiration album for Werewolf the Apocalypse and Werewolf Dark Ages and everything in between. You know, it's great, kind of like a melodic power metal with death metal kind of vocals and stuff, singing about, you know, wilderness and spirits and all those kind of neat things. You know, check it out, it's awesome. And when they finally met with the bear spirit, the totem spirit of the bear, it was also something where I got to describe it the way I would like those totem spirits to be, where it was just basically a force of nature made manifest into a form of a bear, where it was this giant, I described it being so big that, you know, Godzilla would fit in the palm of his hand or its paw, and it was just this ginormous thing roaming in the mountain range, this endless mountain range, kind of scratching its back and kind of pushing mountains almost like, you know, stacks, so that it's kind of terraforming its surroundings as a force of nature kind of thing. And when the players got to meet with it, they were kind of almost like telepathically being floated in the air, and it made eye contact with them and gave each of them these premonitions about who they are and about a lot of things having to do with their character. And it was kind of this existential awakening to a lot of them, because I knew that only one of the players had any sort of contact with the totem of the bear in his prelude John had, and I knew that I wanted the first impression to be, for the rest of them, something where they would see the merit in worshiping it and paying tribute to it and asking for its guidance and help. So I wanted it to be this kind of, if you're going on an airplane trip, pray to the skies. If you're going to, a boat trip, pray to the oceans. If you're going on, if you're going hiking, pray to the to the wilderness. These kind of things. I wanted the bear spirit to be this kind of all-encompassing, ginormous force in the universe, kind of thing, to where they could always feel like it makes sense to turn to him for guidance, protection, wisdom, anything like that, and they would be extremely humbled by it paying attention to them. And it was a lot of fun. And once it had given everyone their premonitions, it sent them back. And that's where this session stopped. And I think I forgot to mention which session it was. It was actually in that Sveriged's Elite Werewolf Dark Ages campaign. It was session 4. Its thumbnail has that werebear and that kind of neon mist coming over mountains and stuff, So check it out. I actually looked at it earlier today, and seeing my long, greasy hair, actually, it wasn't greasy. It's just when I have long hair, it looks horrible because it always looks like it's greasy no matter how clean it is. So no long hair anymore. So yeah, it was a lot of fun. It was a blast to run, and I don't think I've ever felt quite that extent of satisfaction in having to describe something, give my own kind of feel to the setting. And I know none of the players were very familiar with Werewolf, where they had either never played it before or they had played it for just a little bit before. So I felt like this is a perfect opportunity to give a very good impression to the players, and I felt like I pulled it off great, and I felt the players had a lot of fun, and yeah, just a ton of description. I love giving out descriptions about stuff, and I love receiving descriptions about stuff when I'm a player and when I'm a GM and the players take actions. So yeah, that was a lot of fun. See you tomorrow for day 21.